But yeah, I just want to say thanks so much for like joining us. And this will be like really casual, so honestly, you can look me or the camera, whatever.
Yeah.
It's honestly up to you. But I guess just to get started, like if you could tell us a bit about like your career background, going from like I guess like all the way from your undergraduate.
Oh my goodness. So I've been a dietitian a really long time, so I'll give you a truncated version. I spent the bulk of my career at Texas Children's Hospital, where I was the director of adolescent and sports nutrition, so taking care of young women from the ages, and men, from 11 to 25 is the focus of adolescent medicine. In part, the focus of Texas Children's adolescent medicine was going out into the community and serving populations that oftentimes didn't have access to a dietitian. So that's why we did the Girl Scout project. We did a project promoting nutrition education in Girl Scouts, and then the Texans Tweet Healthy campaign was actually my daughter Katie McGinnis's PhD project. So we designed an online Twitter intervention to help middle school girls, lose body fat, but without aggressive dieting. So every week they got an evidence-based tweet, and the focus of the study was to take a look at did it resonate better with the adolescents if it came from a professional football player. So shout out to Daryl Sharpton and Owen Daniels and James Casey, who's a Rice alum, who helped me with this project. Did it resonate better if it came from an athlete or from a dietitian? They liked the athlete interaction better, but they trusted the information from an RD better than they trusted the athlete, although we gave the athlete all the tweets. So I have a real passion for that age group, and because I think that's a real opportunity to change habits and to hopefully insulate people from some of the influencers that I call sinfluencers that are on social media putting out garbage for clicks. So I spent a lot of time at Texas Children's, also have been faculty here at Rice for 22 years, and then most recently full-time as a sports dietitian for Rice for the last 3, and prior to that in a part-time role for the last 10. So I've been part of the Rice community. I also teach at Baylor College of Medicine in the medical school. So a little bit of everything, which is the best part about my job, is to never get bored. So that's my background.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it sounds like you've done like so many.
A lot. That's why I said I've been a dietitian for a long time. So when you get into this fossil category of your career, you've just done a lot, right? At some point you've done a lot. But I have a real, like I said, real passion for underserved kiddos in the Houston community that need good information, but there's not a really good place to get it. So that's why we did the research studies. And again, shout out to the McNair family for providing me the ability to do that as part of my job as the Texans dietitian.
Right, wow.
It was really interesting to hear about the social media campaigns that y'all had done, especially since we're doing a social media campaign ourselves. So although we don't really have access to professional football players, we'll see what we can do about, especially the evidence-based stuff. We'll see what we can incorporate.
Yeah, I think it's, again, getting someone's opinion about food is really important because an opinion informs action, but you also have to make sure that the information that you're putting out is what the science says it should be, and that's the beauty of being here at Rice is I have really bright students who understand the difference between an opinion and the science. And that's hopefully where you're going with this project, because I think it'd be great.
For sure, yeah. I guess speaking of like your really, really robust career, I was wondering like what sparked your interest in nutrition in the first place?
Well, it was a failed attempt to think I could be a physician. So my freshman year in college, I got a D in chemistry, and it wasn't because I goofed off. I really worked hard for that D. It was great that it wasn't an F, but it made me think, can I do this? And so as I went through school, I thought, well, I guess I can't go to medical school. But by the time I finished my graduate degree, I had 33 hours of college chemistry, most of it biochemistry, and that was my minor in graduate school, was nutrition and biochemistry. So I'm really fortunate that I didn't go to medical school. I'm married to a physician. I don't think I wanted to work 80 hours a week. And that's where a lot of docs are these days. So the great thing for me is, one, I get to do prevention, which a lot of physicians don't get to do. And I also get to intervene if somebody has diabetes, hypertension, celiac disease. So honestly, from a career standpoint, it was a perfect fit. It was a perfect fit. So blessing for me that I decided not to go to medical school. In hindsight, I think I probably could have gone with all the chemistry that I had, but I thought, okay, there's a D, check that thing off my list. I'm not going to medical school with a D. But for me, it's a great career choice, really great career choice.
For sure, yeah, especially since there's so much more to healthcare than just like being a doctor, which I'm a health sciences major, so I'm learning about this.
Yep.
Yeah, but I was wondering, like, going back to your like responsibilities as a nutritionist, like, what are your current responsibilities as a nutritionist at Rice?
At Rice, well, I teach Health 103, and so Health 103 is required for some of the majors on campus, and then I'll say my obligations to athletics. Obligations sound like something like I don't like to do, but I love this. I get to take care of 420 student athletes on this campus. I run the Performance Nutrition Center right around the corner from the basketball court, and we provide evidence-based. I can give an absolute explanation for why I picked the products that we have there. So it's fueling our student athletes with quality food. If they're going to work out before, they get a different snack than if they're working out later. So I run the fueling station here. I assist Mo, who's the strength coach at football, to do the same thing over at football. And then anyone who has a chronic illness here on campus, whether it's significant food allergies. I have a football player who has type 1 diabetes that I'm involved, along with the athletic trainers, intimately involved with the care of him. We've got a couple athletes who have all different kinds of medical problems. So caring for student athletes. And another great part of my job is I have great teammates. So I work with all the athletic trainers on campus, and we take a look at common nutrition problems, eating disorders being one, and looking at how do we write protocols. So if they don't see me, everybody is on the same page, all the athletic trainers, because again, athletic trainers are healthcare providers. So my role at Rice is really diverse in terms of managing student athletes. The fortunate thing for me is before I came to Rice, I was the first dietitian at the Texans, I was the first dietitian at the Astros, first dietitian at the Houston Ballet, and first dietitian at Texas Children's in the role that I had. So building programs and setting up an infrastructure that somebody else could step in and just take over if I wasn't there is something I really love to do. So again, love my teammates, but I need to make sure all of us are on the same page when it comes to weight management, eating disorders, nutrition education. So just like healthcare, athletics needs a team approach. And in healthcare, it's doctors, nurses, physical therapists. In this role and environment, it's athletic trainers first, strength and conditioning coaches second. And then I don't want to say my coaches are left out, but they're last on the list. They're last on the list because athletic trainers are healthcare providers, and they are the ones that need to coordinate healthcare. It's not the coach. So a little bit different structure where coaches on every college campus have a lot of influence and a lot of power. We happen to have, in my opinion, really great coaches who are interested in making sure all of their athletes succeed, and not like some of the disasters that you've seen nationally at programs that actually promote eating disorders, promote aberrant ways of losing weight. That is not Rice University. So again, lucky for me, I get to work here.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that Rice University's coaches are, it seems like they're very supportive of like the actual students' like well-being instead of just
Yes.
like, performance.
And it really seems like you've made a lasting impact in all of the organizations that you've been a part of, setting up the infrastructure so that,
Which is fun.
Yeah, for sure.
It's fun, and I'd say who wouldn't want my job, right? Literally, who wouldn't want my job? And it's changing the mindset of people that don't know that it is only the dietitian who can do what's called medical nutrition therapy. So an athletic trainer can't give out diet and disease information that's beyond the scope of their practice, clearly beyond the scope of the practice for a strength and conditioning coach. So it's me staying in my lane, as well as helping other people understand the roles and responsibilities of a clinical sports dietitian, and that's my role here.
Awesome, yeah. Actually, if I could go like one question off
Sure.
of this guide, you mentioned a lot of things about like evidence-based. like things that you do. Could you talk a bit more about that, like how you find things that are evidence-based?
Great question. So evidence-based is a term that we use all the time, acting like there's only one right way. So for example, when it comes to hydration testing, there's not one way that everyone's going to agree that this is the way that you measure hydration. So some of the things that we do, and same thing in clinical medicine, is more what I would call evidence-informed, that you're looking at the science, but the science isn't as clear-cut as you think it might be. So for example, we do hydration testing of the bulk of our athletes, particularly our outdoor athletes, because if you were here in the summer, it was not fun. It was so hot, and the athletes still need to go out. So we have a lot of different technologies that we can use that are more evidence-informed. So I hydration test with urine, we hydration test with saliva, we do weigh-ins and weigh-outs to look at hydration status, how much weight did you lose. Most of that is going to be more evidence-informed. So a lot of organizations, American College of Sports Medicine being one, they have what they call a strength of recommendation taxonomy. So if it's an A, there's multiple randomized controlled trials, blinded, meta-analysis, all of that is going to fall into that category A. Category B is going to be a step down from that there may be case reports, there may be studies that were not randomized, but they're still research studies. And then level C is what is normal practice. What is normal practice? And so normal practice is to do urine testing. That's normal practice, but that in and of itself is not going to be as clear-cut as the athlete dehydrated or not dehydrated. So sometimes, and this is the world of social media, you'll go online and what the person says is maybe 50% true. Maybe 50% true. But the rest of it is garbage. So now the person reading that is looking at this and saying, maybe not evidence-based, could it be evidence-informed, or is it just garbage? And some of it is so sophisticated that if you don't know, if your background isn't hardcore science, you can go down a rabbit hole. You can go down a rabbit hole. So when I see all the time for women is carbs are bad. Carbs are bad. Well, carbohydrate is the short-term fuel of your brain. So if you're taking an organic chemistry test, I wouldn't want you to go in with a low blood sugar. Carbohydrate is the fuel of exercising muscle, and you don't have to be a rice athlete. You could be someone who just says, I'm going to go out and run the rice loop, but I don't want carbs because carbs are going to make me fat. Now, if I'm watching the soccer team, I'm doing nothing. So I don't need a pretzel. I don't need a sports drink because I'm doing nothing. If I walk the rice loop, I don't need to recover from that. So a lot of this is how do we take this information and make it usable for the person who's going to read it and make sure that the science is strong. Because again, I can look online and say, that's mostly true. So in my class in Health 103, they have to do a health fraud assignment. And they have to pick a product or a device and then tell me, do they think it's a good thing or a bad thing? And some of the products are just almost true. So a big thing now is everybody going to drip spas and taking their nutrition in an IV and not by mouth. Well, the body works differently when you give food by mouth versus food IV. But unless you've worked in a hospital where you're managing people on nutrition support, you wouldn't know that. It just makes sense. Oh, this is faster, it gets to the tissues faster, this sounds like a really good idea, but it actually is not. There was a woman in Dallas who died from an IV drip spa, but when people look at the science, they'll say, well, it's so quickly absorbed, you get vitamin C to your tissues a whole lot faster. It makes sense. The problem is you've stepped over the physiology that says that's not a good idea. It's different IV versus by mouth. So this is where social media will always keep me employed, but it's also the bane of my existence because I see people being hurt with social media trying to do the right thing, but they didn't know how to sort out the nuts from the berries and say what of this is factually true. So long answer, some of the stuff is not really evidence-based, but it's evidence-informed, and looking at position papers. So you can look at the position paper on hydration from the Academy of the Sports Medicine group. My professional group, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, will have position papers on nutrition on type 2 diabetes, nutrition and type 1 diabetes. So position papers are a really good place to look to say what is the current best evidence that we have for our nutritional recommendations.
Yeah, wow, that's like super interesting. Just to hear about like the social media. I mean, I've known that social media has a lot of like inaccuracies, but it's interesting how you say it's almost true, but they skip over that one thing.
Yeah, they skip over the one thing that would make it egregiously false, or they give you just enough information. And I'll pick on him because he's been big in social media, the Liver King. The Liver King has pictures of eating all this raw liver, and raw liver. And he talked about how great this is for muscular health and development. And if you look at the guy, he's jacked. But he neglected to say he was taking anabolic steroids. Just left out that little detail, minor detail, left that out. And so he has made, according to Google Docs, he has made $12 million as an influencer. 12 million. So you see people are interested in getting good nutrition information. The question is, where do you go? Where do you go to get things that you could look at this and say, I can trust it, or they're going to tell me the pros and the cons, or they're not going to inflate something that is not worthy. So look at all the stuff that happened with COVID. People were taking mega doses of vitamin C, mega doses of D and zinc. No one ever talked about the consequence of taking too much. I didn't see that. It's like if you're deficient, take this, but nobody talked about the consequences. So I saw zinc toxicities. I saw people getting way too much zinc and ending up with iron deficiency anemia, secondary to a zinc toxicity. But everybody was desperate for some information that they got it, but they didn't get the rest of the story. They didn't get the downside, and nothing's perfect.
Right. Wow. Super interesting. I guess on the note of like where do you get accurate information, going on the next question, I guess from someone who has been in the nutrition field for a long time, what does a balanced, nutritious diet look like for an undergraduate age woman?
Yeah. I don't like calorie counting. I don't like, in fact, we have an amazing group of housing and dining people here. And years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I asked for all the calories to be taken off of the menus for the servery because people were going in and choosing the lowest option, not the best option. So you can see that we use My Plate. And I actually really like the expanded version called the Athlete's Plate. And the Athlete's Plate, again, you do not have to be a Division I athlete to do this. But the more you exercise, the more carbohydrate that you need. So the athlete plates adjust to how much exercise you're getting. I hope everybody's getting a decent amount of exercise on this campus. We got a beautiful rec center. We've got a fabulous pool. So again, you do not have to be a scholarship athlete for this to apply. But if you said, I'm a computer science major, I'm at my desk most of the day, you don't need as much starch as someone who is running 9 miles. You don't need as much carbohydrates. So the athlete's plate flexes based on your activity. I love people to organize a plate because the beauty of rice is we have students from all over the world. And that's part of what I love about this campus. And most of the recommendations will talk about eating eggs at breakfast and, maybe a source of carbohydrate like toast and some fruit. But what if you're from Finland and you want fish for breakfast? Well, it doesn't have to be eggs. It should be a source of protein. So when we talk about what is ideal, it's not only what is your level of activity, but what part of the world are you from? So this plate organization is, in my mind, a whole lot better. What happens if you're vegan or vegetarian and you don't eat eggs at all? Well, the protein source at breakfast could be tofu, it could be tempeh. There's an egg substitute made from mung beans called Just Egg, and it looks like eggs. But you can flex that plate based on, are you vegetarian, are you vegan, what part of the world are you from? Because I think that messaging, when it's plate organization for undergraduate women, when it's plate organization, it takes into account your preferences. So what happens if you only like oatmeal for breakfast? Well, that can go on your plate, but it can also go on your plate that if you have rice and beans for breakfast, that can be your carbohydrate choice. So the plate method, to me, is much better than counting calories, much better than the traditional USDA My Plate. I like the athlete's plate much better because, again, it flexes for activity. And again, we're rice, so I want everybody out there doing something physically active every single day. And so how do we accommodate that? Well, we accommodate that by using a plate and not calories.
Right. And by athlete's plate, just want to clarify, is this something that is like rice specific only?
No, great question. This was actually developed by the United States Olympic Committee. And so it's in the public domain, so we can use it. I actually used it at the Astros and asked permission because 40% of Major League Baseball are Latin players. And so I asked, could I get it translated into Spanish? So we had it in Spanish for our athletes that, and again, people ate plantains, rice, and beans for breakfast, and we could accommodate that on the plate method. So it's USOC, and again, your taxes pay for the United States Olympic Committee, so it's in the public domain. So we can use it. Yep.
Gotcha. Thanks for clarification. Oh, I guess we were also going to ask about something with the USD, like My Plate. So, okay, you already talked about to what extent you agree with this method. Is there anything specifically with like the My Plate, or I guess like athlete's plate, that you would adjust if you could for undergraduate age women specifically?
Yeah. There are a couple things in clinical nutrition, one specifically that you don't get a do-over, and that's bone health. So bone, you accrue most of your bone between the ages of about 11 and 25. For women, you've got most of your adult height, you're essentially done growing 2 years after you started your period. So if you started your period when you were 10, you're probably not going to get significantly taller, but that doesn't mean you're not building more bone. It doesn't mean that you're not improving bone density. So if you are profoundly calcium deficient in that window of time, you are setting yourself up for bone disease. And so working at the Houston Ballet for as long as I did, a lot of those young women just said, well, I don't want to eat cheese or cottage cheese or yogurt because it's too high in calories, not realizing that, again, I do not work for the Dairy Council, but dairy is the best source of calcium. There are soy milks and almond milks and other plant-based milks that they can add calcium to, but you actually have to read the label. And because it's added, it's really heavy. It's a heavy mineral, and so it sinks to the bottom. So if you get soy milk, you got to shake it, or calcium fortified orange juice, you really have to shake it to get that calcium back in solution. So with bones, you get one shot in your life to build a skeleton. So when I look at risk factors for undergraduate as well as graduate students, one of the things that always concerns me is, are we building the right combination of nutrients for bone health? So bone health is like making a pot of soup. It's more than one ingredient. So bone health is calcium, it's vitamin D, it's protein, it's weight-bearing exercise, it's magnesium, it's potassium, and now the new kid on the block is boron. And boron comes from prunes. Please don't use borax detergent to get a source of boron, because that is a thing on social media, eating detergent. It's like, how did anybody ever come up with this? So I am concerned about young women not getting enough of the right information. So if you said, I hate dairy, never liked it, I'm milk protein allergic, please don't eat dairy. But then what that means is you have to take a supplement. You have to take a supplement. And that supplement is probably lifelong. It's lifelong. One of the things that I think plagues us more now than it did even 5 years ago is you can get all your lab work on MyChart. So if you go to the doctor and they draw blood, you can access your own lab work. And honestly, oftentimes you see that lab work before your physician does. And everyone says, well, I don't drink any milk and my calcium is normal. Well, that's swell. But calcium is an electrolyte that's really important for normal heartbeat. So if you don't have enough calcium coming in your diet, you're pulling it from the bone to keep your blood value normal. And so calcium in your blood is not a measure of calcium nutrition. So I am concerned about young women. Dairy consumption in the United States has gone down progressively in the last 15 years. And more women are not as physically active as they were 15 years ago. So we're losing two of the major parts of that recipe for bone health, not as much physical activity and not adequate amounts of calcium. So that concerns me for undergraduate and graduate women when they're either on campus or moving off campus. What is your source of calcium going to be? Calcium is not as biologically available from things like spinach and kale. It's bound to a compound called oxalic acid. So on paper, spinach is a great source of calcium. Biologically, it's very poor. So that's why I said I don't work for the Dairy Institute, but dairy is the best source of calcium, best source. So yeah, when we build out that plate, thinking about where can we get good sources of calcium. So if I'm thinking about a good breakfast, yogurt is a fabulous source of calcium. Taking yogurt, mixing it with fruit, and making a smoothie out of it is a really great way to kind of meet those requirements, but in something that, as long as you can tolerate it, that you're getting that calcium. A cup of yogurt is about 300 to 400 milligrams of calcium, and your requirement, depending
after you finish like growing, it's like you're done with your calcium. Like you don't have to worry about it. That's so interesting that you say that bone health like is still, or like when you're was it until you said 25 years old?
Yeah.
It's still super important.
Well, and bone is not like a piece of chalk. It's a living and dynamic tissue. So yes, your calcium requirements can go down after growth and development, but they never go to zero. They never go to zero. And so when you look at the epidemic of osteoporosis and osteopenia in adult women, again, you get one shot in your life to build a skeleton. So if you said to me, I really want to gain more muscle, the science is pretty clear. You can gain lean body mass into your 90s. You can gain muscle mass into your 90s, but you get that window for bone health. And so for young women, that is a red flag for me. And so when I take a diet history, I'm always looking to see, is there adequate amounts of calcium? And if there isn't, and somebody hates dairy, perfectly okay. But then we get into that world of you got to supplement. You got to supplement. I also think for young women as they're building a plate, if you have a regular period, it is really hard to get adequate amounts of iron in your diet, super hard. And so if you said, I don't eat red meat or I'm vegan or vegetarian, then I'm also going to push you towards you need a multivitamin with iron because you're generally not going to get enough. So I think a general rule of thumb is the more restrictive your diet gets, even if it's for all the right reasons. Let's say you're vegan because of sustainability, you're vegan because of animal cruelty, perfectly okay. But the more I narrow the list of acceptable foods, the more likely I am to have a nutrient deficiency. So vegans can be deficient in calcium, iron, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids, which are generally found, best sources are cold water fish. So again, the more narrow those food choices become, the more likely you are to either A, have to expand those, but if that is not in your social or moral conscience, then you're really looking at supplementation. Perfectly okay to do that, But just because you eat clean, I don't know actually what that means. Just because you eat really quality food doesn't mean you can't have a nutrient deficiency. Absolutely can. So building that plate with a wide variety of foods and trying new foods is, in my mind, what all students on Rice campus need to do. So you might be aware at West Servery, they did a whole highlight of African foods. And so they actually got recipes from some of our students who are from Africa and said, is this jollof rice, is it authentic? Does it taste the right way? And so the answer was yes, they did a good job of executing it. But in other cultures of the world, people can get calcium from like soft bones in fish, or if there's a fish soup that's made and it's made from the bone stock of fish, that some of that calcium is going to leach out of the fish bones, and now that soup becomes a good source of calcium. So I always say, please don't ever eat like an American. If you grew up in a different part of the world, eat like your grandparents did. So a good place, and I think it's a fabulous Netflix series, is one of the best Netflix series I've ever seen, is How to Live to Be 100. Because what they've done is they've highlighted different cultures of the world that eat dramatically different diets. But they highlighted all the great things about eating a Mediterranean diet. They highlighted Okinawa, Japan. They highlighted Costa Rica. They highlighted Seventh-day Adventists, who by definition are vegetarians, stay away from alcohol and tobacco. And they all had really great health outcomes, but the secret was they all ate a wide variety of foods. They all, at some level, knew how to cook. So I think learning how to cook is something all successful people know how to do, because I really wouldn't want you to spend your whole entire life on Uber Eats. I'd like you to be able to cook some simple meals. And I think those are the kinds of things that keep people healthy and well. It's not always eating, because I always say in my class, I am a white woman from Wisconsin. So I grew up eating potatoes, chicken, and green beans. That was the way that I grew up. I didn't grow up eating beans and rice and plantains. But learning how to expand your palate is one of the best ways to be well nourished. That's why I like the plate.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't know West Servery also had like the African food.
It was so, and I don't know how many other college campuses you've eaten on. If you don't find something that you can eat here at Rice, you would not like any of the other big schools. You would not like them, because I've eaten on every campus, major campus in the state of Texas, hands down. Food's better here than any other place.
Wow.
So keep that in mind when people say, I don't like the servery food. Maybe it's because you haven't tried some other interesting things at the servery, but the servery food in general is creative, innovative. We have vegetables at breakfast where a lot of people would never serve spinach or mushrooms or peppers at breakfast. But we do here at Rice. So there's lots of dietary diversity here, if you're willing to give it a shot.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, like our group, like kind of spontaneously thought of something where it's like, oh, maybe we should like do kind of like a tour through like one of the serveries to see like what's new. Because I know a lot of, me included, me and my friends just like kind of beeline for the same thing every time.
Yeah. Yep.
So it might be cool to see like, oh, maybe there's some like new ways that we could customize our food that we did before.
Well, and West also has an allergy-free station in the middle of West, where none of the common allergens are in anything. So there's no soy, there's no dairy, there's no gluten. And so if somebody has severe allergies, they can just go to that section of the servery and get a customized dish based on things that you would like, but the 7 common allergens are not used in any of those foods. So again, lots of great options on campus. But if you find something that you like, human nature is like, I'm going to go back and get, fill in the blank, whatever it is. It could be a stir fry, it could be a pizza, it could be a panini sandwich, and you know it's always good, so that's what you get, versus jumping off that ship and getting on maybe the diversity ship when it comes to food and nutrition.
Sure, yeah. And it was like super interesting things about this survey. Oh my goodness. Let's see what else we have. I guess what was it? We can go to number 6, which is it seems like all our interviews expressed interest in rice like publishing nutritional recommendations like specifically for women.
Mm-hmm.
So to what extent would you like support this sort of idea project, and what extent do you have interest in contributing to such a project?
One, and I told this to Amelia, because this is my passion, I would love to help. The guidelines are nice, but they have to be translatable into food. So nutritional recommendations for women, if you're looking at how much vitamin C, how much calcium you need, nobody knows how to translate that into food. So just like I said about the calcium, if you need 1,300 milligrams and you have a cup of yogurt, which is 400, that's nice, but you're not close. You're not close. So I think having the recommendations and then how do you get that from food, I think would be a super helpful option. And again, because we have students from all over the world, how would that look if you're from Africa? How would that look if you're from Asia? How would that look if you're from India and you eat lentils and dal and homemade yogurt? How does this all work based on our beautiful melting pot here at Rice? Because the guidelines and nutritional recommendations are great, but to me, when you say recommendations, it has to be translated into food. What does that look like? What does that meal look like? Because if you don't learn it now, and again, by definition, everybody here is inquisitive, bright, have the ability to learn it now, then when you go out and you're wildly successful in your career, if you think you're busy now, my husband as an OB-GYN, probably his average work week was 80 to 100 hours. 82, because babies are born whenever they feel like it. So you don't get to say, sorry, not now, come back 2 days from now. So I think, or you're an attorney and you're preparing for trial and you're at that office all day long, what are you going to do differently to make sure, if you don't understand the principles and how to translate that into food, are you just going to stock your office with pretzels and bars? Or are you going to look at different, healthier ways of making sure you've got something in your refrigerator? So I do think publishing nutritional recommendations for women is a good idea, but it has to be food. There has to be a link to food.
Right. And that's a really good point, too. I know a lot of times, sometimes you'll see like, oh, you should have like this many like milligrams, but I'm like, I don't know.
What is that? What is that? Or what are my food sources even, right? What are my food sources? So magnesium is now a mineral that everybody seems to be paying attention to, and it comes from green leafy vegetables and nuts. But it also comes from herbs like parsley and basil and peppermint and different seasonings that you would use in food. So again, if you know how to cook basic foods, and then you think, I wonder what herb could I put on there to maximize nutritional value. Herbs are more than condiments. They actually are plants, and so the more plants on your plate, the better. But, just taking, let's say, a pasta dish, and you have to be able to cook and make a homemade pesto or a parsley gromoletta, where you're taking parsley and olive oil and lemon zest. Not hard to do, but the fancy words intimidate everybody. It's like, just chop up some parsley and squeeze some lemon in it. All of those can contribute to your overall nutritional status. And I know I've talked to people within housing and dining. I'd love to do a cooking course here on campus that is focused in on how do you save money and how do you save time. So we've had a cooking course on campus, but it was let's make salmon with pistachios and pomegranate Ariels. Well, that dish is now $20. And if you're a student, $20 may be a little bit hard to swing for just a protein source. So it's how do you make something easy, quick, as well as meeting all your nutritional recommendations? Because my experience being here as faculty, everybody goes on and they're wildly successful in their career. But do you know how to do the ultimate self-care, which is taking care of the quality of the food you put in your body? And I think that becomes super important. So I think it'd be a great project. I think it needs to be linked to food.
Right. And definitely the cooking class, like honestly,
wouldn't that be fun?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Idea. I would love to take that class if it's ever offered. Let's see what else. Okay, back to like the serveries. I guess you might have already kind of covered this, but if you want to say anything else, how well do you think that Rice serveries or like H&D provides a balanced, nutritious diet for undergrads?
I think it does depending on what you choose, but no one's going to force you to eat something, right? So you can go into any servery and decide all you're going to eat is desserts. And so you're not taking good care of yourself. Or you can go into the servery and say, I've never tried teff before. I've never tried barley before. So I'm going to choose that as my grain, and if I don't like it, then I won't get it the next time. So I think the serveries provide a wide exposure to food, but I have students on this campus that have never eaten a vegetable in their life. So getting them to try a green bean may be the epiphany that they have because they just weren't raised that way. So I think our serveries do a great job. I don't know that most students would know this, but we employ chefs on this campus. So if you look at the bigger schools in Texas, they use bigger food service vendors like Sodexo and Aramark. And the people that come in and do that cooking are following their standardized recipes. We have chefs and they can improvise. They can improvise. And so, yes, there's maybe a basic recipe template that they follow to make sure that there's consistency. But again, the African Food Project was a great example of saying, we're going to try different recipes here. That wouldn't happen with most major campuses. It wouldn't. So yes, I think our serveries, I'm a huge fan of housing and dining here. I think they do a fabulous job. But it's up to the student to decide, am I willing to try something that I've never tried before? And that's the biggest, I think that's the biggest barrier. I think everybody that was on this campus during COVID would acknowledge housing and dining, just like every other place in the country, didn't have the same amount of food choices because of that. And so a lot of people got into a rut of saying, I'm going to have a burger every night, that's what I'm going to have, rather than saying, I wonder what that pasta dish is, I wonder what's in it. Nah, I'm just going to eat a burger and fries because I know I like that. So it's stepping out of your comfort zone and finding something that you've not had before and giving it a try. And if you don't like it, fine, but you at least tried something new. So I think they do a great job. And they don't write my check, they don't pay me. So I just am a huge fan because, like I said, I've eaten on every college campus around. I'm an LSU alum and I ate in their new performance area, which is beautiful. My bias is the food here at Rice was better than they had in their multi-million-dollar facility. And I can say that as an LSU alum, so they can come at me, but I ate there. So it wasn't anywhere near as good as what I've had here. So I think the diversity is there if you're willing to try.
That's interesting. I hope maybe our project can kind of encourage this too. Student end. But you also mentioned barriers for like people in the servery. So is there anything else that you think is like a main nutritional barrier for women at Rice as a whole? Major nutritional barrier or major nutritional need. The barrier is in part, I think once people move off campus, my experience is fruit and vegetable consumption goes down. So I think a barrier could be understanding that if you move off campus, it's perfectly okay to use frozen vegetables. Perfectly okay. Canned is maybe a step down because they're more processed. The reason to eat fruits and vegetables is the color, it's not the vitamins. I can give you a vitamin supplement. I can't replace the colors. So canned corn or frozen corn is still yellow. And the yellow in the corn is actually really great for your vision. So the more colorful, so getting people to realize that sometimes the barrier is just what you know or don't know. So I see people saying, oh, I moved off campus and I can't afford organic apples. And it's like, don't buy them. Eat the apples, wash them, but look at how much produce you can put on your plate. So I think sometimes the barrier is your own orientation to nutrition. Well, it wasn't organic, so I decided not to eat it. Or the vegetables in the servery or the vegetables my roommate made were frozen. And so we get into the realm of what I call nutritional elitism, meaning that if it's not this, then I shouldn't eat it.
if it's not organic, if it's not fresh, if it's leftover from yesterday, I shouldn't eat it. So sometimes the barrier is a knowledge deficit. It's a knowledge deficit that folks just have. Again, sometimes it's because that's the way they were raised, and mom and dad said the only thing we're bringing in this house is organic. So they come here and they'll say, is everything organic? No. No, because I don't think you want to double the cost of your meal plan. If you move off campus and you think, I don't have time to cook, please buy frozen vegetables because they don't spoil. You got to seal them so they don't get freezer burn. But the nutritional quality is really quite good. It's really quite good. So I think sometimes the barrier is your belief about food and nutrition. And that, again, do we serve everything organic on this campus? Absolutely not. Do I buy everything organic in the performance nutrition centers? No, because I can't justify the cost for what it is. I need people eating fruits and vegetables. I haven't done a survey at Rice, but this might be really very helpful. If you look at adolescents, and again, adolescence is 11 to 25. If you look at that age group, the average consumption of fruit and vegetables is 1.8 servings a day. You need 5 as a minimum. And so is the barrier that you believe that if I had apple juice in the morning, that counts as a fruit, and French fries count as another vegetable. And so if I just get pasta and chicken, I've met my fruit and vegetables. So I think, again, probably knowledge deficit, and it's odd to say that at Rice, that there's a knowledge deficit, but I think it's a barrier. It's, did you get well-versed in nutrition before you got here? Some people do. And some people will come in and say, well, the only thing we ever did at home was Whole30, so we eat low carb. My whole family eats low carb. It's like, well, that might be good for your mom and dad, but probably not good if you're trying to make the ultimate Frisbee team. You're probably going to need to have more carbs. So I think knowledge deficit is one. You can make great choices on campus. Moving off campus, if you have roommates, it's really a great idea to have divide and conquer. So you're not the person having to cook every night. And getting people to learn how to cook collectively as a group, I think, is important. And there are some honestly really great apps, really great cooking apps, and things to keep food safe that I think would help people as they transition from an on-campus experience to off-campus.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You mentioned like knowledge deficit too. Something I would not have expected, but definitely like it. I think the more you talk about it, the more it rings true. I think we're probably gonna go on to. Yeah, like I know you mentioned like iron, magnesium, calcium earlier. Is there anything else like specifically for college age or like also young female professionals like within that age range, like any key nutrients that they lack?
Vitamin D. Vitamin D. Vitamin D predominantly is not a food source. Food sources are not what most people think. You think if I have a glass of milk in the morning, I got enough vitamin D. Milk is actually not a great source of vitamin D. Better sources are salmon if you eat meat. And if you don't eat meat, a much better source than milk is portobello mushrooms. So those big mushroom caps that you can get that have a meaty taste to them. So if you're vegetarian, actually is about 300 milligrams of, international units of vitamin D. And same thing is true with salmon, but salmon has 700 international units of vitamin D, and the requirement's about 600 as long as you're not deficient. It's the most common nutrient deficiency out there because it's made by the sun. That's your primary source. And if you wear sunscreen, you don't make vitamin D in your skin. And I don't want you to get skin cancer, so there's a trade-off there. And if you're a person of color, whether that's African American or Indian, Pakistani, anyone who has a significant amount of melanin in their skin, it acts as a natural sunscreen. So people of color need to be out in the sun more. And again, that makes me a little concerned about skin cancer. So vitamin D deficiency is pretty common in young women. And if you have an indoor career, like you're an architecture student, you may be inside at the computer most of the time and you're not out, right? You're not outside during the day. You get to work early in the morning or class early in the morning. You finish up your labs late at night, and guess what? You weren't outside in the sun. So
yeah, that's a very common.
Or it's 100 degrees outside and nobody wants to be outside in the sun. It's like, please let me go inside. So I think those are what I would call vulnerable nutrients. Calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, and iron, I think are all vulnerable nutrients for women. And then if you don't eat any cold water fish, another potential deficiency is omega-3 fatty acids. And that's predominantly from cold water fish. So I think there's lots in terms of nutrient deficiencies that young women are susceptible to. Susceptible to, it's probably the best word.
Yeah, super interesting stuff. I'm learning so much over here.
Good.
Yeah. And then, okay, I think you covered mostly like how rice underuds can make up for these deficiencies. If you want to say anything else about the deficiencies you talked about, go ahead. Otherwise, I don't mind also moving on to the one about the eating disorders, which if you see like the picture at the bottom.
Yeah, pretty frightening.
Yeah, like we were all like super shocked when we saw this. So I guess like just in your opinion, looking at this today, like what do you think might be the main cause of like such high rates among rice undergrad women?
Lot of different factors. One, I think societal pressures for women to look a certain way, we can't ignore that, right? We just can't ignore that. And we have a culture that values thinness, that values being lean, that values being fit, that you don't necessarily see those same values imposed on men. For men, it's can you get stronger, can you add more lean body mass? But you hear still in 2023, you go in and you see a woman who's gained 10 pounds and what you hear is, well, she really let herself go. And so I think there are societal pressures on women to do it all. You got to be smart, you got to be a professional, you got to be lean and fit, you have to have all these different roles, and oh, by the way, you have to do them well. I also think this was highlighted in a very dramatic way during COVID because any social interaction with food was taken away. You got your box of food, you had to go eat by yourself, and there's not an eating disorder program in the city of Houston that didn't feel the pressure of having more women, and it's not exclusively a women's issue, but it's predominantly more women. Again, in my role at Texas Children's, we ran an eating disorder clinic. And so I've worked with women with disordered eating for 35 years, and this is the worst I've ever seen it. Because now in COVID, you can imagine part of an eating disorder is lack of control. Nobody could control what was happening during COVID. None of us had any ability to control what was coming next. And I think Rice did an exceptional job of testing people and making sure that you were COVID-free and everything went online. I think Rice jumped on that faster than most colleges did. We basically said, don't come back after spring break. Stay home, don't come back, where a lot of schools let people come back after spring break and then sent them home. Okay, well then you just exposed everyone. So the lack of control, in part, is the etiology of disordered eating. I can't control X, but what I can control is the quality and the amount of food that I put in my mouth. In general, and this is a stereotype, I'll acknowledge that, in general, eating disorders are more found in high-achieving women. In high-achieving women, which is the definition of Rice University, right? It's the definition. So the lack of control, high-achieving women, and then we marry that with some of the myths and misconceptions about good nutrition. Now we've got the perfect storm. We've got the perfect storm. And that's why I said I don't like calorie counting. I don't like calorie counting. I need to take a picture of this, but almost every time I walk by the fitness center, I see women on the ellipticals, I see women on the treadmills, I don't see women lifting weights. It's probably 80-20. And this to me is that knowledge deficit. So the more muscle mass you have as a woman, and trust me, 99% of women, even if they lift weights, are not going to look like a guy. You don't have enough testosterone to look like a guy. So adding more muscle mass increases your metabolic engine, meaning that when you're sitting at your computer doing your work, the more muscle mass you have, the more calories you burn at rest. You make more muscle by lifting weights. And so I see all these people looking at how many calories did I burn. Oh, my Apple Watch told me I burned X amount of calories. All of this technology, and I wear technology, all of this technology estimates how many calories you burned. It can't give you something that is 100% factually true. So most of the treadmills overestimate the calories that you burn by 25%. That's huge. It's not 5%. So you go in there and you think, okay, I burned 500 calories, so now I can go to the servery and have 2 cookies. And so we justify our ability to eat something that we love based on what we burned. And that is sadly, culturally, oftentimes the way women approach food. I earn a dessert by what I burned, and you don't earn the ability to love food. You don't earn the ability to say my favorite food in the world, fill in the blank. My favorite food in the world is chocolate. So anybody who's going to be a physician when I'm 90 years old, I want chocolate and red wine. Really good red wine. So don't give me something that's a $3. No, buy me really good red wine because I love chocolate. And as a dietitian, if I just have to tell people what I love, and I'm sure there's foods that people love that are quote unquote not healthy for you. So my definition of good nutrition is, yes, you have to have fruits and vegetables. Yes, you have to have a quality source of protein, but you also have to eat the foods that you love. And you have to do it in a way that makes you feel really good about your food choice. So again, for me, if it's not chocolate and it's a dessert, it's not that I don't like it, but I don't love it. And so Thanksgiving, I don't love apple pie. I don't love pumpkin pie. They're okay. But if I'm going to have a dessert, it's going to have chocolate in it. And if there's not chocolate available, it's not a punishment for me to say, I'm going to wait till I can have a really good chocolate dessert because I really enjoy that. So I think in a world where women are held up to a different standard in terms of needing to be lean, needing to be fit, we create this mindset that we have to hide foods that we love. And it could be Doritos, it could be Cheetos, it could be French fries, whatever your favorite food is, learning how to eat that in moderation and not rely on, I can only eat this if I burned off X amount of calories. So not only are the treadmills inaccurate, the apps for your phone that track your food are inaccurate. So in my class, people have to track, assuming that they don't have an eating disorder, then they get a different assignment if it's too hard for them to do that. But they have to track what they eat. So not this semester, but last semester, there must have been chicken curry on the menu at the servery. And so everybody was using the same app, and it showed that 6 ounces of chicken curry, and curry's generally made with coconut oil and coconut milk. It showed that 6 ounces of chicken curry had 1 gram of fat. Not a chance. The app was wrong, but people believe the technology is factually true. So they'll say, looks like I only ate 1,200 calories. I burned off 1,200 calories on the treadmill, and both of those are wrong. So now the person says, I don't understand why I'm losing weight. There must be something wrong with my body. Why can't I lose weight when everybody else can? And it's because you got bad information. So that's why I don't love people calorie counting. I don't love that. And I don't love it when particularly women feel like they need to apologize for a food source. So haven't done this in a couple years, but I used to bring in, chocolate's my favorite food, a 7-pound bag of Hershey Kisses into my Health 103 class. And I'm introducing myself eating chocolate candy. And you see people looking at their phone thinking, I must be in the wrong class. This can't possibly be nutrition. But the first lecture I give is why we eat what we eat. Why do we eat what we eat? And part of it is, what foods do you love? So it doesn't surprise me that eating disorders on a very competitive campus with brilliant women are more prevalent. But I also think it's We are trying to figure out our energy balance, and that's a much harder assessment than most people give it credit for. It's really hard to know exactly how many calories you're burning, really hard. So we've got this perfect storm of, I need to control something. Here's what I can control. I can count, weigh, and measure. And I'm going to exclude these foods that I love because I shouldn't be eating those. And then, oh, by the way, you go back to your dorm or back to your apartment and you eat the whole bag of Doritos, but you didn't want to eat Doritos in front of your friends because you should know better. It should be, you should eat healthy foods. And my response is, but don't you love them? And if the answer is you love them, you need to learn how to eat them so they don't have magical properties. They don't have magical properties. So eating disorders are really complex, super complex. Certainly there can be trauma, there can be childhood things that didn't go well, and that's where a really good therapist comes in, really good therapist. And I'm a huge believer in mental health services. So if somebody is really struggling, I always say I'm the Band-Aid as a dietitian, and sometimes what you need is a surgeon, and that's mental health. That's mental health. And I think just like talking about calories and how many calories you burn, I still do think women, I think, are better about this than men. I think mental health issues absolutely have to be addressed. They have to be addressed because if there was trauma in your childhood, and the trauma can take on a variety of different pieces. If you were food insecure, meaning that you didn't really know where your next meal was coming from, you're much more likely to develop an eating disorder. Much more likely. Your ability to self-regulate, eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, gets broken when you've been starved as a kid. And starved is not like you never had food, but you might have food during the school week, but on the weekends when you're home, there wasn't food available. Or it was, I grew up really poor. I remember thinking the best thing in the world was pancake suppers. The reason we had pancake suppers is because my family didn't have any money. As a kid, I didn't know that. I thought, this is cool. I get pancakes. I can cover them in syrup, and I don't care about the eggs. The pancakes were my favorite part about breakfast for dinner. But a lot of folks grow up in that environment, and now your ability to self-regulate. That's why I think going back and taking a deeper dive on some of the mental health issues. And as a dietitian, that is out of the scope of my practice. I am not a therapist. And so there are people that I can see that if it's the nutrition piece that I can fix, but a lot of folks are going to need a different level of care. And I would say, please get that resolved as a college student. Please seek out mental health services as a college student to address some of the things that y'all found in your survey. And again, that's beyond nutrition, but my favorite way of treating people with disordered eating is helping them to organize a plate. So all the stuff we talked about with a plate, we use the same concepts in treating disordered eating. How do you organize a plate for fullness? How do you get to the point where you appreciate, am I hungry? Or am I craving something, and cravings go away, hunger does not. So if someone says, I was really craving chocolate, I'd say wait 20 minutes. Was it a really craving because you were biologically hungry? If you're biologically hungry, go get a sandwich or something else. Don't make a meal on chocolate. But making sure there's room for that chocolate is also a good idea. So some of this is, where are you on that hunger scale? Meaning, are you stuffed? Are you 10 out of 10? Or are you 1 out of 10? And if you're 1 out of 10, meaning that you're really hungry, you owe it to yourself to eat. Hunger is like fatigue. Most women would not feel guilty if they made a plan. So think about this. You make a plan to say, I'm going to stay up for the next 48 hours to get all this work done. And you make that as a plan. Seems logical when the words come out of your mouth, and then 24 hours in, you can't keep your eyes open. You're falling asleep with the book in your lap. Most people are not going to feel guilty about that because you recognize, maybe that wasn't a good idea. We do that with food all the time. I shouldn't eat this. I shouldn't eat this. It's really okay for me to be hungry. And then when you eat, you feel guilty about what you ate. No different than fatigue. no different than sleep. So I do think on a really elite competitive campus with all the history that we had with COVID, knowing that eating disorders are not just about the food, that it requires a multidisciplinary approach. It requires a physician to make sure you're safe, it requires a mental health person, and requires a dietitian. And I think those are the kinds of resources on Rice campus that if I had all the money in the world, I would probably hire another half a dozen counselors and some really experienced eating disorder dietitians to work in the wellness center. Because I think with those kinds of resources, you can now navigate that in college rather than you go to law school and you didn't take care of it, you go to medical school and you didn't take care of it, and the pressures and the stresses are worse than they were in college. And now what is your coping strategy? You may not have one, and that's why if I ruled the world, if somebody was asking me where I'd like to spend $1 million, that's where I'd spend it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was like super, super insightful. And I just want to say, like, the thing what you said about at the rec, like, was it 80% of the weight room is like not women? It's so true. Every time I walk in, I like whenever I see someone who like seems like a woman, I'm like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, because you're an outlier, right? So I don't know, good or bad. I go to the gym every morning before I come to work. Every single morning, unless I'm sick, then I don't expose people to stuff. And I will routinely have men say, do you want me to take that weight off? And it's like, no, I just put it on. So even in a gym that's not college students, you generally see more women doing cardio and fewer women lifting heavy weights. You just don't see it. And so all forms of exercise are great, stretching, yoga, Pilates, all of this. But somehow women have pushed themselves to, let me do more cardio. And again, I want you to develop more muscle mass. I want you to have a bigger engine as you go through your professional career and make as much muscle as you can, because muscle is what burns calories. And so if your muscle goes away, right? If your muscle goes away because you're losing weight, then all of a sudden you got a Prius for an engine, and I want you to have an Escalade. I want you to have something that's just burning fuel when we're sitting here doing nothing. That's the goal, and that doesn't happen with aerobic work. Doesn't happen with aerobic work. Happens with strength training. So again, if you have to take an LPAP, take a strength training one. If you've never done this in your life, have somebody who knows something teach you. So now when you're out in your professional world, you'd say, yeah, I'm going to go run after work, but if I have 30 minutes to go to the gym in the morning, maybe I need to concentrate more on strength training versus the aerobic work, and split it. Some aerobic, some strength training, and I'll say create an immunity towards the loss of muscle mass that happens with all of us if we don't lift. And again, I'm not a strength coach. We've got some great strength coaches on this campus. So if I need help, I go to my strength and conditioning buddies and say, tell me what you think about this. Is my form great when I do this? And again, fortunately for me, I've worked with amazing strength coaches throughout my career, and they've taught me enough to be safe and taught me enough to know how to develop muscle mass over time. So my goal is when I'm 90 years old, I can still carry a 40-pound bag of dog food up a flight of stairs. That is my goal. So if I meet that goal, I'm going to be like a happy person. Happy person.
That sounds like a great goal. I think maybe I might adopt that goal too. But yeah, I think just going off of like, what women do or don't know. For anyone like wanting to learn about nutrition, what resources on campus are accessible for everyone to educate themselves?
Really great question. I know there is a dietitian that works associated with the wellness center. I think she might be a really good kept secret. Unless she's left, last time I checked, she trained and did a lot of her clinical work at MD Anderson, which tells me she knows enough about clinical nutrition that it's not just performance-based nutrition. So I think that would be one, and you guys can verify that for me and see if that person is still on campus. I teach one section of Health 103, and it closes the first night it's open. So now I have a wait list of 25. I have a wait list of 25, and it's like a nightmare for me to sort that out. David McDonald and I, the guy who runs housing and dining, said, I'd love to do this course. I want to expand and make that course of how do you integrate nutrition and food. I do think social media can be awesome and great. It depends on who you follow. So I certainly have my own Twitter account. It's just my first and last name, @Roberta Anding. We have a Rice Sports Nutrition account, and anybody can access that. We probably have 30 or 40 infographics that are, how do you get protein at each meal? We have one called Home for the Holidays, what happens when you go home. You don't have to be a Rice athlete to access that. That's available to anybody. It's just the account on Twitter and Instagram is Rice Sports Nutrition. So we have a lot of stuff on hydration. So again, when I was talking to Amelia, I said, it'd be really great for me to follow your account and then for you to follow ours. And so that way it's rice-based nutrition education. There are some really great follows on social media. I have a really good friend. She's the dietitian for the Kansas City Chiefs, and her name is Leslie Bonci, Bonci, and she is a fabulous follow on social media because she's also really good at food demos. I am less good at food demos. Leslie is amazing. Every once in a while, 4-letter words come flying out of her mouth, so you got to be prepared for her irreverent point of view. And then there are fabulous scientists that people can follow for really great evidence-based information. There, I'm using that word again. There's a guy by the name of Stu Phillips, and his Twitter and social media handle is McEnprof, and he has some of the best information on protein and strength training throughout the life cycle that I've ever seen. It's amazing. He also has a YouTube channel that's really outstanding. And although he's, I'm going to say, more of an exercise science nerd, Dr. Glenn McConnell has a fabulous podcast called Inside Exercise. So he has almost a new one that drops every week. It's probably better for people that are in kinesiology because a lot of it is elite science-based information. But I look forward to when I walk my dog every Sunday morning listening to what's new on Inside Exercise. So there are some great follows, and then there are some that are really marginal. And I hate to say it, some of the really marginal ones are by dietitians that are influencers and get paid a whole lot of money to promote X. And so if somebody has a podcast or anything that's associated with a product, they're supposed to say #client or #paid. And now the new thing on full disclosure is #paid partnership. So I've done stuff for Gatorade. And so with Gatorade, anytime I post something I did for Gatorade, I put #paid, #client, because then you know who is paying me. I don't do any paid endorsements since I've been at Rice. I don't do any. So if I recommend a brand or a company, I'll say not paid because I want someone to know that I'm not getting paid. So that's why I said I don't work for the Dairy Institute. I don't, because you need to know if I work for the Dairy Institute, then I have a bias, and that bias needs to be declared. So I think a great service for women's health would be coming up with 4 or 5 really good websites that women on this campus could follow. So everybody's on social media. No one's not on social media. So with all of the information on training and menstrual cycle, Kirsty Sale is the person. She is the person. So if someone says, well, I decided not to go to the gym today because I have my period, makes no difference. The science doesn't say that you need to make any nutritional alterations in 2023, because it used to be, oh, take it easy when you have your period, don't go out and exercise. That evidence is not there anymore. Nor does it mean you have to change your eating patterns based on where you are in your cycle. So again, from a women's health standpoint, I think I think Dr. Kirsty Sale, her husband Craig Sale, works a lot with women who run marathons. And again, you don't have to be a Rice athlete to be physically active. So that powerhouse duo of Craig and Kirsty Sale provide really lots of great information for women. So those are the kinds of things that I think from what kind of service could you do for women on this campus is finding some, and again, I'm happy to help you vet them, but finding really great advocates for women's health that are evidence-based. Not all OB-GYNs are, so you got to be really careful. And again, I'm married to an OB-GYN, so not all OB-GYNs provide really good information. Not all physicians provide good information, and I already damned my own profession. Not all dietitians provide good information. So it's becoming harder and harder to find, look at Dr. Oz. Some of his stuff is great, some of his stuff is not great. And he's a cardiovascular surgeon. So you look at this and think, well, certainly he has a really good background, he would be reliable. Nope, not always. So that's the real challenge in 2023 and beyond. How do women find really great resources? Same thing for cooking, because I don't want to forget to mention this. Again, I bought this app. It's probably my favorite app I've ever purchased. I think it's $6. It's the New York Times cooking app. Unbelievable, because you can search by healthy. You can search by 30 minutes or less. And if you can really cook, there's some elite recipes there. If you can't, you can find something that you can put together in 30 minutes. And don't think I've ever made anything that wasn't amazing. I can cook, but they've made me a much better cook than I was at the beginning. So I think simple, easy recipes are really important. And I have a cookbook that if you email me, I can send you, that I'm a big slow cooker fan. Not really Instapot unless you know how to use it. Pressure cookers, I don't like students that have maybe not really great cooking skills use a pressure cooker because it can explode in your face. So generally a fail. Where a slow cooker, they're super cheap. You could ask for that for a holiday present, and a lot of the recipes that I have are what I call dump and go. You dump all the ingredients in, come back 6 hours later, and your kitchen smelled like a family member was there cooking for you, which is awesome. So I like really quick and easy things that busy students don't have to spend 4 hours in the kitchen. So, New York Times cooking app.
Gotcha, yeah.
And they didn't give me one for free, so this is not a paid endorsement. This is just one that I really enjoy.
Right, but it sounds like you get your money's worth of $6.
I do. Yeah. So all of my Thanksgiving recipes are coming from that app. How to brine a turkey, which I didn't know was a dry brine versus a wet brine. So I thought, I think I'll do the dry brine. So again, even if you don't have great cooking skills, but you like to cook, this will make you a whole lot better. And it'll tell you the difficulty. Like, this is not a beginner. This is not a beginner. So did we get most of your questions?
Yes, I think honestly, if you want to look at this too, Megan, I think honestly, this is pretty much everything.
Yeah. I think the only thing, and if you could, you covered a lot of it, especially talking about the app and the different ways that you get recipes in that cookbook and stuff. But do you have any recipe recommendations that you could give for either on or off campus students? Because brining a turkey is probably not going to happen. Not going to happen for a college. And I'm happy that you're brining. That's great. I'm sure my family will be doing that too. But so whether it's I've heard some people say that you can take food from the servery and sort of spice it up and make it a little bit different in your room. I've had people tell me in the interviews that I take little cups of oatmeal and cereal and things and store them in my room so that when the serveries are closed, I can have something to eat. I've had people who are off campus say, one of the girls in our group was saying that, she likes to buy fresh food and fresh fruit or fresh vegetables, but they go bad really quickly. Right. And whether or not it's, what are some good recipes that just a really good staples.
Yep. So if you go on our Rice Sports Nutrition app, we have a whole infographic on dorm room dining. And so how do you take things? And again, I'm a huge believer in if you have a meal plan that rice pays for your food. So you can take the oatmeal cups, You can make your own overnight oats with those oatmeal cups and yogurt. And again, I think we need to get over the fact that everything needs to be fresh. But if it was important for you to be fresh, you could take oatmeal, yogurt, and an apple, and then the only spice you need in your dorm is cinnamon. And you can make amazing overnight oats that, again, very inexpensive, easy to do. The real challenge is, do you have a refrigerator that keeps things at 38 degrees? And so if the answer is no, then the shelf life of that food becomes significantly truncated. So I do like instant soups, and this is, I think, where ramen comes in for a lot of people. But you can take ramen noodles and, again, take vegetables that maybe you brought home from the servery, take a little bit of that chicken breast that you put on your plate, take the vegetables, and now you mix it with your ramen, and you've got a really nice, nutritious instant soup. There are a whole bunch of ones in the grocery store that are beans and rice, that you add water and you microwave it, and it's a cup of beans and rice. So it's a great source of protein, great source of fiber, good source of magnesium, all these vulnerable nutrients. But I think learning how to do that on campus is an art form. It's an art form. So I would also say the serveries have gotten to the point, and justifiably, where you can't take all this food out, right? You can't take all of this food out. But if you made a plate of food and a turkey sandwich and put that on your plate as you checked out, no one's going to tell you you can't do that. What they frown on is you went in and took 6 chicken breasts and 5 potatoes. There's no way you're going to eat that at a meal. So not being so conspicuous, but you can easily have your plate of food and then maybe a cup of dry cereal and a yogurt. So you can easily do that. And I really do like this because I really like cinnamon. You can just take like a Granny Smith apple, cut it up and put it in a mug and microwave it for about 7 to 10 minutes. It makes the best applesauce. You don't need to add water. You don't need to add any kind of oil. And then you take that and put it over a carton of yogurt. It tastes like apple pie, and it makes your room smell like apple pie. So you could just a Granny Smith apple and cinnamon. Cut it up into small pieces. Watch it in the microwave so you don't overdo it or underdo it. But because apples are 90% water, they don't need any water. Covering it up with like a paper towel or a Ziploc bag to make sure that you're keeping some of that steam in is a good idea. But it's really easy to do. Super easy to do. So these hacks, how can I make something better? But again, I think we need to turn the page that not everything's going to be fresh. You just got to turn the page on that. And if you're not a really good cook, Green Giant and Bird's Eye makes pre-seasoned frozen vegetables. The Tuscan broccoli is some of the best broccoli I've ever had in my life. So if you said, I like broccoli, but plain broccoli, blah, and I'm not going to go out and spend $20 on spices because spices are real expensive, invest in, they make a fabulous corn medley with peppers and a little bit of like sriracha and honey. So now it's corn with a kick. So if you're looking for some of these pre-made ones, there's a broccoli cheese rice, there's seasoned Brussels sprouts. So if you don't know how to season, this is a really good instant cooking lesson. So you think, oh, these Brussels sprouts were pretty good. I thought I hated them. So what did they put? What did they put? So, they put Italian seasoning. So the next time I go and invest in a spice, I'm going to get Italian seasoning. So some of these, how do I do it? Again, that was our focus for the Rice Sports Nutrition link. And again, you don't have to be a Rice student athlete to access that. We're just out there on social media. So you can go back and review all the posts. We've done probably 50 infographics. And a lot of it is, how do you do exactly what you asked? How do you put this together? Because nobody, to your great point, nobody is brining a turkey. You don't have the space to have a turkey in your room. And even if you're off campus, now what do you do with the brine? You don't have a smoker. So how are you going to do this? So the easy hack would be, if you live off campus, buy a turkey breast because they're small and just defrost it. Make sure you defrost it before you put it in the oven. But there's all easy kinds of ways of making all kinds of really good stuff. So I think that's where maybe the cookbook with the slow cooker would be a nice resource for the women on this campus, because again, let's say you're going from here to medical school. You're not going to have time in medical school. Promising you, you're not going to have time in medical school. So you didn't learn how to do it in college, and now you don't know how to do it as a medical student. And so you're now relying on the break room where there's donuts and taquitos and candy. And now you are really not fueling your body well, but you're hungry. And you just, I hate to say meal prep doesn't work for busy professionals, but it doesn't work. So don't want to be a pessimist on this, but it's really hard. So it's like, let H-E-B or Kroger do all the meal prep for you. Let them peel your carrots. Let them chop your onions. And yes, it is more expensive, but it's not as expensive as ordering from Local Foods or True Foods Kitchen or any of the other healthy eating options close, or any place in the Rice Village. So it's going to be cheaper, not as cheap as if you chopped it all on your own, but a better option for you. So all kinds of things.
Oh, these are such like great resources. Yes. I live on campus, so I'm gonna try that like Granny Smith apple thing.
It is honestly, it's one of my favorite. And a nice vanilla yogurt now really tastes like ice cream. It tastes like ice cream because you get the cool sweetness of the yogurt. And I love hot cooked apples with cinnamon that really smell like apple pie. It smells like apple pie that you just took out of the oven. And if you're missing the grain, just put a little bit of oatmeal over it. And now you've got your own version of apple pie. It's that combination of sweet and cold and a little bit of crunch. You could use granola. You could use granola on the top of that. And now you've got something that you look forward to eating. And it's less likely, if you have something that tastes delicious, that this mindless eating when you're studying of just hand to mouth, you're minimizing that because you're planning on having that for a snack at night. I brought this home because while I'm studying, I know I'm going to want something to eat, and I'd rather have something that tastes amazing than just the mindless eating. And everybody at some point does mindless eating, whether they like to admit it or not. I remember studying for biochemistry, and this is way before all the technology existed, and I would have reams of paper and just writing out pathway after pathway. And when I figured out what I didn't know, I would eat popcorn. I would find myself eating the popcorn faster because it's like, oh darn it, this exam is tomorrow, and does it donate a hydrogen or does it accept a hydrogen? And it's like, oh my goodness gracious, I can't remember. And so I still can go through those pathways in my mind, but I can just remember sitting there with a bowl of popcorn thinking, why am I eating like the speed of light? That's not going to help me learn anything any faster. But that's just the relationship between stress, behavior, and food that we all experience at some point in time. So I'll be interested to see how you cut this up.
Yeah. I'm interested to see how this goes too.
I'm sure it'll be great. You give us a lot of fantastic, information, and you're such a fantastic speaker. If I would have been you, I would have been like, I don't know.
I talk for a living.
Yeah.
I talk for a living.